Today we have an amazing speaker. Her name is Jessica Tomasula, and she is going to talk to us about the important topic of behavior change and as it relates to reducing our risk for falls. So please pay attention, engage in this conversation, and we're going to have our little learning lab activity afterwards. So there you go, Jessica.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Jessica Tomasula. I am a licensed health psychologist, so my focus is on how the body and brain work together. And I focus on folks who are struggling with chronic health conditions, so how they adapt and overcome. And because January is the month of resolutions, of course, whether you made them or not, whether you kept them or not, a lot of people are focused on starting out the new year, and that involves changing behavior. So I love the fact that you all just came from moving your bodies, because now we're going to go into the mental gym, right? We're going to talk about how our brains can help us support behavior change. And in the context of falls, that's really important because, you know, acceptance and commitment to change are two of the things that you need to think about before you even consider what behavior you want to change. So for this program, it would be accepting the fact that you are in a group that is at higher risk of falling, right? And then committing to changes that will prevent those falls. So even if you're like, I'm good, I got it, right? Those two things are necessary for behavior change. So if you live or work or have family members who are really struggling with behavior change, you may think, oh wait, have they accepted the fact that they need to change, right? Where's their insight and awareness into that? And then have they committed to what it would take in order to sustain those changes, right? Like resolutions, they come and go. So. And I love it if you all would, if you have questions, comments, concerns, as we go along, feel free to, jump right in there. I want it to be as interactive as possible. And certainly that's why we have the Post-it notes, because I'm going to ask you to be writing down just one or two things. So, all right, any questions thus far before we get into it? Okay. So the biggest thing I think to remember is, why do we change behavior in the first place? Why is it important? And so I know you've heard the buzzword of self-care, right? But what is self-care? It is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve your own health. And it's the practice of taking an active role in protecting your own well-being. So it's not just physical health, it's mental health, behavioral health, however you'd like to call it, and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So we are going to talk a little bit about the science of happiness, because a lot of times when resolutions or behavior changes fail, it's because people assume that this change will then result in them feeling happier or more content. And when they don't feel that way, they disband the behavior change. And they say, well, that didn't work because I don't feel any better, right? Whether it's mentally or physically. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So what is self-care, or what are examples of that? We have so many different types. As you can see, you might find that some of them that you see here, you didn't even realize was self-care, right? So for physical, we have sleep, stretching, walking, exercise, healthy food. So a lot of y'all may have seen the protein or power balls that I brought and said, what are these? If you've tried them, please do. They actually do taste good, but they're for people who have dietary allergens, allergies, and also are looking to increase their protein, which helps us stay strong. It's called Juice Keys, Juice Keys, and they have 3 locations, and they are very committed to good food, but good food that is good for you as well. And as much as we all love a good crumble cookie, and I feel like I could really roll into this training when we're talking about physical and mental health with something that, everything in moderation, including moderation, but that might not be the best thing to show up with. And these are just as good, I think, and sweet. But anyway, so healthy food, yoga, and rest. Other types of emotional self-care, managing stress, emotional maturity, forgiveness, compassion, and kindness, as well as kindness to yourself. Social types of self-care, boundaries, right? Making and keeping those. Support system, positive social media if you use it, communication, friend time, and asking for help. So all of these things are considered self-care, right, in the social realm. Spiritual, time alone, meditation, connection, nature, journaling, a sacred space, or music. Personal down below, a little difficult to see. So hobbies, creativity, finding your identity, what makes you you, right? Goals and honoring your true self, right? So that means that my behavior aligns with what I value. Space, safety, healthy living environment, falls prevention, right? Security and stability, and an organized and clean space. Those are all examples of space self-care. Financial is saving, budgeting, money management, paying those bills, and splurging. So like I said, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? Work, so that could be how you manage your time. Again, boundaries, having a positive space to work, more learning, and also, of course, taking breaks. So that could be anything that you pursue in learning. How do you make sure that you take breaks? How do you make sure that you have space to do that, right? So that's just an overview of self-care. Now, I know that we all know generally what self-care is, and this is one of my favorite images here. If we know what to do, what is it? If we know what it is and why it's important, then why don't we do more of it, right? I bet what I just said you have heard or knew before I said it, right? You know what self-care is. And this comic says, sometimes, even if I stand in the middle of the room, no one acknowledges me. And of course, it's a big elephant, right? So why do you think it is so hard for us to do things that benefit our self-care?
It would be a changing.
Right, yeah. It usually requires a change.
It takes energy.
It takes energy. Yeah, so maybe you are more focused on others rather than yourself, right? That's a great example.
It feels selfish.
Yes, and you know what's funny is that when I talk about this, I do talk about how do you, in your mind, give yourself permission to pause and enjoy self-care. And part of that, we need to acknowledge that we have to give ourselves permission because sometimes we think it's selfish. But the way I have to flip it in my head in order to do that, because I'm just like everybody else, right? That I am a better mother, spouse, community member, friend when I take care of myself. So I can be what I want to be to others when I invest in myself. And it's not me first, it's me too. So you're not putting yourself in front of other people, therefore no need to feel selfish. You're just in the game, right? In the self-care game. So if you have trouble figuring out how can I accept the fact that I need it, think about ways in which you can give yourself permission. Those Post-it notes can be, what can you say to yourself? So one of the things that I say to myself, and I write down on a sticky note so that I can see it, is I deserve to be happy too, right? That's a lot of that if we're worried about that selfishness piece. Other people will say exactly what I said before. I can be a better person to the people that I care most about when I care for myself, right? So if you have any good thoughts that you say to yourself, please tell us because we love good ideas, or write them down so that you can remind yourself, right? Does anybody have any other things that they may say to themselves in order to encourage yourself to do things for you?
I worked in a very high-stress job.
and the employers knew that it was high stress, so every year they would bring a psychiatrist or a psychologist in to teach us how to manage stress. And none of them got it because it was a stressful job, period. There was nothing we could do about it. So finally, one hit it on the head. He said, if you can't reduce your stresses, increase your joys to achieve balance. And that finally gave us something we could work with and deal with. And that's held true all my life. I just tried to have enough joys to balance out the pain and the stresses.
That is a great example. Thank you for sharing that. She said increase the joys. So in this context, that would be increasing your self-care activities, right? Because that will bring you joy, happiness, contentment, and sometimes take your mind off of those stress and pain points in life, right? They have got to be equal, or trying to get as equal as possible. So I talked a little bit about what is the context of happiness in this conversation, and there are actually two types of happiness. The first one is hedonia. That's pleasure. That's that hedonic happiness that we think about Las Vegas, right? It feels good. I want it, so I'm going to work hard to get it. But sometimes we notice when we get that, well, it doesn't really hold, right? Like, oh, I really want this car. I'm going to save up all my money. I'm going to get the car that I want. Now I got the car that I want. All right, life is still the same. That happiness buzz was short-lived. That's hedonia. And then you have, because it's based in pleasure, right? Usually short-lived. Not to say that it's not acceptable. That's a form of happiness, right? But we have, and this is the cycle of desire that I talked about before. I want something, I give myself the reasons why I need it, why I want it, why I deserve it. Then I achieve it, whether it's a job, whether it's a car, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a vacation, whatever it is, right? Once I achieve that, then that becomes your new norm. You become very used to the thing that seemed insurmountable or unreachable, right? And then it goes like this again, right? I will say for so long, I tried so very hard to become a psychologist. I'm the only person in my family that has a higher level of education. My grandfather didn't graduate high school. Like, this was not in the cards for me. So my whole identity was wrapped around making sure that I could become a psychologist. So a lot of my life was just education and work. And then once I actually did it, I was like, oh, great, okay. I really didn't celebrate that because I was so focused, and then realized, oh gosh, I have this whole other part of life that people have been living, and what's a hobby, right? So I think even if it's something that you truly want, that's okay, but knowing that that type of happiness is short-lived. So the type that really helps us is called eudaimonia, try to say that fast, and that is happiness that is based in meaning, so something that is meaningful to you, and something that engages you with the world around you. And the biggest example of eudaimonia is when people find that they do altruistic or pro-social things, so even small acts of kindness, right? They are meaningful to you, whether or not someone receives that, right? Says thank you, smiles, likes the gift, whatever it is. It's the fact that you're doing something that means something to you and you are engaging in the world around you. That's the type of happiness that sticks and stays, right? And that we need in order to safeguard against the hedonic pleasure, right? That is up and down. So there's a couple theories behind, well, what is happiness? Why do we have it? How do we get more of it? And this here says, okay, we've got happiness here going up, right, on the y-axis, and the x-axis is time. And good and bad stuff happens, right? Basically, life happens. We've all in this room, you could educate me on all the ups and downs of life. And what we're trying, and we have a set level of happiness, much like we have a weight set point, right? So we were born with a certain level of happiness, some more than others. And what we're trying to do is find that middle ground of contentment, right? I'm not going to be, because happiness is just like sadness. It's a feeling. It comes and goes, right? Feelings aren't facts. What we're trying to do is have that sense of contentment, right? My life has value and purpose, right? It's a little bit more settled than, woo, right? Joy and sadness and disappointment. So we know that happiness leads to better self-esteem. At the stage that you all are in life, you may be looking back at your life and feeling like, oh, I have such a good sense of integrity because I know that I have done things that have meaning for me and I've engaged in this world in a meaningful way. And if you're like, ooh, not as much as I had hoped, well, then you're figuring out how can I do that now, right? And that's okay, but thinking about how we find that happiness is more about eudaimonia than the other. So when we think about, well, is it all just a set level? Like, gosh, are we just born with a certain level of happiness and you get more than you do and, right? No. So happiness is made up of, yes, 50% genetics. 40% of that is intentional activities. So things that we do on purpose with intention. That's a lot of what we have control over, right? And then 10% is life circumstances. You're born into poverty, you're born in a different country, you're born into great social stature, like those are things that just happen to be. That's only 10%. So we know that there is some wiggle room in that happiness set point, but only if you do it as it relates to meaning and engagement, that eudaimonia, right? Yeah.
I don't know that I quite get genetic set point. Are you saying that's a part of our DNA or?
Yeah, so the way you see the world, like our perception is reality. And I bet in your lifetime, you have probably met some negative Nancys, right? Or you have met some people that see the glass half empty. That's just, their perspective. Does that mean they're less happy than another person? No. Does that mean they have to try harder to see the joys in the world? Potentially, yes, right? Just like athletic ability.
But that's a certain.
Yeah.
You can't control that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
What you control is the intentional and the life circumstance.
Yes, but you can also nudge that set level, this genetic set point, by doing things that have meaning and engaging around in the world around you. They've found, studies have shown that the eudaimonia type of happiness, the more you do that type of happiness, the more you can nudge this set level of happiness. You can nudge it. Just like if you make meaningful, healthy choices, you can nudge your weight set point, right? Now we're in the context of GLP-1s and all types of medication that can also nudge your weight set point, but you can do things that will nudge that level of happiness. But no one can tell you how to do it or what to do because you're the one who gets to determine what is meaningful what is meaningful to me and how am I going to engage in the world around me? What does that look like? And so one of the things that once I took a breath of fresh air and said, oh my gosh, okay, I did it. I made it. I'm a psychologist, right? Did all the things that I thought I needed to do. And I realized, gosh, I'm not a member of my community. And that is something I value. How can I give back or how can I integrate into my community? And so that's one of the reasons why I'm here, right? Because this does make me happy. It is meaningful to me because it is based on something that I value. And of course, I love talking about behavior change. I'm a psychologist. But
Something got to do with satisfaction. For example, I don't have the money Bill Gates has, but I'm satisfied because I can feed my family. I've sheltered my family, so I'm not upset about that. So it's part of it,
right,
being satisfied to some point.
Yeah.
And my wife says she's never going to be satisfied. I've always got one.
Yeah.
Something about satisfaction.
Yeah, so he used a great word of satisfaction, and that's what I say, contentment. So when I was saying feeling content, it's feeling satisfied with your life, right?
Like, for example, I almost have Tom Cruise's height And I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And my wife would like to have his looks and his money.
Yeah, well, you can't have it all, right? Yeah. Yeah. So when we think about, okay, now we know why it's important to make behavior changes that align with your values, how do you do it? And how do you keep doing it? How do you maintain that? Because our brains really, really enjoy habits because they exert less energy when they have habits, right? If you're doing new things, or if you are doing what we call emotion-driven behavior, right? So I feel a certain way, so I'm gonna act a certain way. I feel a different way now, I'm gonna act a different way. Ooh, that's a lot of energy for the brain because it is up and down and all over the place. Our brains and bodies really like habits. They like things to be very boring. Just like our blood sugar, we want to stay stable. We also want to stay stable in our routines and things like that. So the more habits, healthy and helpful habits we have, our brain is free to do things we enjoy, right? So I do not get any money for this, although I wish I did. This is an oldie but a goodie. It's also on audiobook. James Clear. Has anybody ever read Atomic Habits? Okay. All right. So it is old. Like he's coming up again because it's like resolutions, right? Do you remember any of it?
No.
I know because it's like I think was in the 90s. I probably should know that, but
In this room, that's not old.
yeah, well, actually, his work in here cites a lot of things from the psychologist Thorndike, which was in the 1890s. So it's older than this room, 1890s. A lot of the principles that he talks about, he's not a psychologist. He came from the work from Edward Thorndike. So, all right, how do we create a helpful habit? First, we have to make it obvious, right? So I'm going to use an easy example that that has taken me a lot of time to do. I wanted to be able to exercise because that's something that I valued, right? I don't consider it self-care though, different thing. But I needed to make it obvious. So I had to get my workout clothes out so that I could see them because that's a cue. It cues me to say, oh yeah, that's right. I did say I wanted to be active today. So I need to make it obvious. I need to make it attractive, right? So sometimes that means that you can pair it with something that you enjoy. So if you're like, gosh, I really love hanging out with Sally and Bob, and they go for a walk, so even though I don't really enjoy walking, I want to spend time with them, so I'll go, right? And for me, I'm a cancer survivor, so it was attractive to me to reduce my risk of remission, of a recurrence. And as much as that's like, oh gosh, heavy, no, that's what it is for me. And that was attractive enough to say, oh, okay, no, I am in this. I want to be able to go to my oncology checkups and say, I'm doing it, right? Because I don't want to have to go through that again. So you have to have some attractiveness. And whether you pair it with something that you already know to be attractive in your life, that's okay. But don't expect you to stick with something that you don't find attractive. So if you get stuck on something that you're like, gosh, why can't I continue to do this? This is something I know I need to do. I've made it obvious, right? I've even paired it with a reward. If it has no meaning or value to you, you're not gonna do it consistently. So don't skip that step. Make it easy, right? So again, for me, I can't go to a gym. I'm not gonna get there. My schedule is too crazy, so I work out in my garage, COVID style. So it's very, very easy for me to roll out of bed and go downstairs. Is it comfortable? No, but whatever. Make it satisfying. So how do I do that for myself, especially with physical activity? Because come on, you're sore sometimes. It's hard. You could not do it. But when I think about the days that go better for me, what do they look like? Usually, I'm moving my body in some way. It gives me more energy. It makes me feel more focused on my day. When I have days that go awry, if I look back on those days, I skip some steps. And one of those was physical activities. So it was really just accepting the fact that I had better days when I moved my body. Yes, it took more time and energy. Yes, I did not enjoy it all the time, but that was the reward to me. But again, you can go and find your own rewards for whatever that might be. Okay, so just a little highlight on the psychological part of this. So it's called a cue because you're cueing yourself by making it obvious. It is a craving because you're making that habit attractive, meaning you want to continue to do it. And I found, so I don't have to think about it, I've got the same YouTube channel. It's free. I follow the same lady from Canada. It is she doesn't talk. There's no rah-rah stuff. I can't stand that. Like whatever it is, find your stuff that is good. Make it easy to perform. So don't say you're going to start and do something every day of the week when you're not doing it at all right now, right? So, behavioral momentum, very, very small changes, because then you can be like, oh my gosh, that was easy. I'm going to up that, right? I'm going to walk for 5 more minutes. And then make it satisfying, make it rewarding in some way, form, or fashion. So has anybody had any examples of like what they've done in order to kind of get themselves into making a change that has worked? And it might be something that you've done for so long that you don't even recognize it.
You guys are getting yourselves here.
That's true. You're showing up. That's half the battle. Yeah. When I see clients and they're like, oh, I've done nothing or it's been horrible, I'm like, but you're here. That is half the battle. You're showing up. Right? Ready to learn and receive. Okay. So if we want to break an unhelpful habit, which I'm going to go ahead and put this out there. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to start new things. I'm going to read more books. I'm going to be more active. I'm going to take on more things in my life. If we put that energy towards stopping an unhelpful habit, then we would have more room mentally and physically to take on new things. So I want you guys, this is going to be part of the Post-it notes here, to take kind of an inventory to think about whether or not there's a behavior or an action, right, or a thought pattern that you're doing that is not helpful to you. And the way in which we change that, right, is we make it invisible. It's not there to, it's not in our line of sight, so to speak. So if I want to spend less time on social media, I have to delete those apps, or I have to put it on a section of my phone that I don't see, as an example. Make it unattractive, so it doesn't have the same zip, right? Make it difficult. So it is extremely hard for you to do the thing that is not helpful to you. Right? Make it inconvenient, and then make it unsatisfying. So it's kind of the opposite of what I just said. And I know that's kind of tricky to think about, but you have to make it hard for you to do something that you know isn't helpful to you. So right now, what I'm trying to do, which is really hard, is break the habit of looking at my phone at a stoplight, right? And it's very, very tricky to do that, because I know I could put it in my back seat. I could put it in my trunk, right? There are so many things that I can do to avoid that behavior, but I haven't done those things that I need to do, right? I haven't made it visible. It's not, I can still see it, right? It is attractive to me to keep into all the know of what I feel like I need to know. It is way too easy for me to grab. And it's still satisfying. So part of what I'm working on is saying, okay, how can I make it so that it's not in my line of sight? How can I say to myself, this commute is worth itself alone? You have your time here to sing, to do nothing, to listen to an audiobook, to call my mom, to do whatever I want, and to unplug, right? Making it attractive, I have to figure out what is satisfying and what is valuable to me so that I can replace that. Yes, so telling a lot of examples here because you guys are tired out probably or thinking about your own examples, but that's an example. So just because I can or feel that I should do something is never sufficient. And so when you're thinking about, gosh, how am I getting in my own way of my happiness or of doing things that are helpful for me? Think about good days and think about not so good days, What'd you do on the good days, right? What was going on those not so good days? And you really can compare. So I know we spend a lot of time thinking about like, oh, that was a really hard day. But we don't think about the days that are like, not that bad. On that not that bad day, were you more social, right? Did you move your body more? Did you talk to, whatever it is, even if it's a very small thing, even if you got to listen to the birds, they can be very, very small things, but we've got to acknowledge them in order for them to be valuable for us. So, last little bit, I love this thing, which is don't wait for motivation. I think a lot of people say, gosh, in order for me to make changes, I've got to be motivated to do it. So I'm going to be sitting there waiting on that motivation. It will not come just because of what I said before. Your brain likes habits, and you have to train your brain, do it over and over and over again. If we are waiting for motivation or the feeling, that is short-lived, right? The part of our brain, the amygdala, that does that emotion regulation, it's all over the place. So we can't wait to feel motivated. We have to do it anyway. So for me, every morning I wake up, I feel tired. I'm never not gonna feel tired. Every morning I wake up and say, oh, I'd rather stay in bed than roll out of bed and go to my garage, my cold garage, and work out every morning. If I leaned into the feelings and emotions related to that and waited to be motivated, it would never happen. So I just have to say, all right, I know this behavior works for me. I'm tired, this stinks, that's fine. I can say whatever I want to myself, right? Or about it, but I'm not gonna, kind of fake myself out and think like, oh no, I need to be motivated in order to do this. I should be motivated. Nope. Take that out of your thought pattern. So how do we do it then if we don't have the motivation to do it other than what I mentioned before? But I don't want to. Novel by me. It's something called the PREMAC principle in psychology, but a lot of educators have used it. It's also called temptation bundling. There are lots of different ways to talk about it, but what it is you're saying, okay, let me do the thing that I have to do, that I don't want to do, that is non-preferred, and then I get to do the thing that I want to do, that I like to do, that I prefer to do. So when we think about kids doing their homework, right? All right, let's get to homework. We'll do 15 minutes of problems, then we'll give you 5 minutes to dance around, check TV or do whatever you want to do, eat a snack, and then we continue to scaffold it. We continue to say non-preferred, preferred, non-preferred, preferred. So for you, that is also helping you earn something, rewarding yourself. So if I'm gonna go on my walk, what can I do after that as like a little, yeah, right? Am I gonna stop at a bookstore that I like after? I don't have to buy anything every time, but I'm just gonna go and be in there and, feel the vibe. So, yeah, don't wait for motivation. Try to do that paired. I don't wanna do it. I want to do it. I don't want to do it. I want to do it. Does anybody have any questions about that piece?
I think chocolate's a good reward.
Yeah, actually. And so that's the other thing about, I work with a lot of people working on their healthy lifestyle. And so there are negotiables and non-negotiables. So I worked with a 60-year-old guy who was like, I go to Bojangles every morning. Don't tell me that I can't go to Bojangles. And I'm like, I don't get to tell you anything. But your doctor wants your blood pressure to go down. So what is negotiable within your Bojangles drive-through experience? And also he liked talking to Kathy, the lady who's in the drive-through, right? So that's rewarding for him. He's not going to give up Bojangles, even if he could give up the biscuit because he enjoys talking to Kathy. That's okay. So are there some times that we could choose another option that isn't sweet tea? That was negotiable for him, right? So think about it in that way. For me, my non-negotiable is chocolate. However, can I have some quality difference in there? Yes. If it's dark chocolate sea salt with caramel or pretzel, that is my jam. I can say no to milk chocolate. white chocolate is not even chocolate. Don't talk to me about it. You know, there are things that are negotiable within the family of chocolate, but it is not negotiable for me to ever say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to restrict, because that is just not realistic for me in my life. And I'm okay with that. So I'm glad you brought up chocolate, because that is a huge example for me. So if you would, let's practice now trying to write something down on your sticky note that you would actually like to stop doing. And like I said, it might be a behavior, avoidance behavior, right? It might be a thought pattern. Anything that you know is not helping you and it's making it harder for you to live your best life, write that down. And then also think about, right beneath that, what's the name of a person that you'd be willing to tell about your plans to stop doing this? That doesn't mean they're your accountability buddy. That just means that when we speak it, right, when we write it down, we're more likely to make it happen. So who can I go to say this? They don't have to be on me. They're not going to nag me. That's not their role, right? But they might say, oh gosh, I need to be doing that too. Okay, let me check in with you, right? It might happen that way. But anyway, I'll give you a few moments. All right, so this is me. Thank you so much. I know you guys are going to do learning lab activities, but truly reach out if you've got questions, comments, concerns. I often see clients who are maybe your children's age, right? So they're in that sandwich generation of caring for their kids and also making sure that they've got, I don't know, really, they're probably annoying you with how much they want to make sure that you're okay, but they come with a lot of stress. And I also see kids, so kind of like the whole lifespan assessment, therapy, consultation, and training. And I will certainly try to get you what you need. If it's not me, there are lots of resources, and I'm learning more and more about those. So anyway, and if I don't speak to you again, that's okay too. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that we do run into each other again, and hopefully we might. Right, Christina? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.